Hello, and welcome to the Good Human podcast. This is episode 4. I'm Anne Halliday, and we are sponsored by CrossFit Castle Douglas. So, today we are going to talk about protein. We've already spoken about fruits and vegetables and how important they are for your fitness and for your health. And we're going to move on today and look at what is actually the most important macros. So, your macros are your protein, your carbs, and your fat. Only 2 of them are actually essential to us, and that is your protein and your fat, both of which tend to be grossly undereaten by people. I've yet to meet someone who undereats carbs unless they're purposefully doing so. And if they're purposefully doing so, then that's a whole other conversation about the keto diet. So, why do people undereat their protein and their fat? Very often it's to do with weight loss. So especially in the case of fat, they perceive that fat will make them fat. We'll save that conversation for another day. And I think there's a lack of understanding about protein. Also, carbohydrates do tend to make up the food that's very highly palatable, the convenience foods, the crisps and the biscuits. That's all carbohydrates. So the protein and the fat doesn't always have to be purposefully eaten. It's quite often in amongst things. Very little protein would you happen to eat incidentally. Okay, so you have to purposefully decide to eat foods that have got protein in them, or higher concentrated levels of protein in them. So your protein is going to be essential to your health. It's going to help you, so it's very satiating, so it's going to help you eat less other things, so it's going to keep you fuller for longer. So if you're trying to lose weight or help your body composition, then protein's going to provide a very important role in that. If you're under eating it, then you're probably again eating more processed foods. What is enough protein? You're looking at about 0.7 grams per pound of body weight. And that's for your more active community, which is essentially, I suspect, the people who are listening to this. We're looking at people who are exercising regularly, lifting some weights, doing some resistance training. And in order to build or maintain muscle mass, you're going to need to keep that protein on that like 0.7 level. If you're trying to lose weight, if you're trying to cut weight, then you could eat your protein at the level of your target weight, as long as it's not too far below your current weight. So, it's going to be different if you've got 50 kilos to lose than if you've got 10 kilos to lose. If you've got 10 kilos to lose, aim for 0.7 times your target weight. If you've got 50 kilos to lose, then you could meet in the middle somewhere in there. So, as you age, it gets a little trickier. We're not talking impossible. It just gets a little trickier. You maybe have to be a little bit more careful, a little bit more measured about your approach to your macros. You're not going to get away with quite as much as you maybe did when you were in your 20s. And when I say older, I really mean like 35 plus. So, when I say older, people are often thinking like 60 plus. I'm really meaning sort of 35 plus. You're going to find that maybe it's not quite as easy to lose weight as it once was. You're maybe going to find that you don't build muscle quite the way that you once did. But that's fine, It's maybe not massively noticeable unless you're really, really looking for it, or you've trained over a very long period of time, you've spanned those decades with training. If you're newer to exercise, you're probably completely unaware of this, and you will be for a very, very long time. So when you're looking at your macros, that protein, fat, and carbs, I don't want people to dig themselves into a big complex hole of nutrition to start off with. We've already talked about eating enough and enough variety of fruits and vegetables, and building a complexity with that as you go along, and not jumping in too early with things that are too complicated. Build good habits, good, solid, simple habits. Just eat more fruit and veg. Then eat more variety of fruit and veg. Make sure you're eating that sort of 800-ish grams plus of fruit and veg. Make sure you're eating, green vegetables in amongst that. And the same idea with the macros. So I wouldn't suggest straight off that you go, right, let's divide our macros into 30, 30, 40, protein, fat and carbs. I would say initially, just look at are you eating enough protein and measure that. And then divide the rest of your calories between fat and carbs freely. So your protein at that 0.7 grams per pound of body weight, that's a really good starting place, but don't stress out if you're not quite hitting that. Get as close as you can. You know, that's going to be better than you've probably previously been doing, especially if you're now doing it consistently every day. So what can happen with a lot of people is that they hit one day, they do really good, and then the next day it's not so good, and then over the weekend, it's all like crisps and chips, and so try and be consistent with that. And then we can add in the fats, and then we can look at more like that careful balance of what your macro division should be. If you go straight in with optimal complexity, you're probably going to find it difficult to do over a long period of time. And frankly, you might never need to do it. You might be very successful just measuring your protein and just eating enough fruit and vegetables. And that is going to be easier to do for the rest of your life. Now, I mentioned that if you are wanting to lose weight, if you're wanting to cut your body weight, then you could eat at your protein at your target weight. Equally, if you're wanting to increase mass, you could up that protein quantity to 1 gram per pound of body weight and see if you can do that and sustain that over a longer period of time. Another thing that I get asked a lot is about protein powder. So before I wrap this up, I just want to address that. And I want to address the optimal sources of protein. So optimal sources, let's look at that first. So your optimal sources for most people who are wanting to cut weight or just be healthy is going to be fish and lean proteins. So stay away from any kind of processed like burgers, sausages. I mean, I would think that's fairly obvious, but just in case it's not. Lean proteins, turkey, chicken, fish, shellfish, very lean cuts. So you've got pork, lean cuts of pork. Yes, some red meat. Track the fat. You don't need, so it's quite dense in protein, so you don't need huge amounts of it. And then we've got protein powder. So I get asked often about protein powder. Is there a problem with that? Should I, shouldn't I? So, if you want to create good eating habits that are going to last you a lifetime, then I would suggest that you always aim for real food, whole food. However, what I have also came to realize over the years working with many, many clients and being a human being myself is that sometimes we just don't quite hit the mark with what we're eating, either because we've not been shopping, we're not prepared, whatever it might be. Maybe we're going out for dinner, so things are a little skewed, a little bit off. In which case, protein powder is a good thing to have in the cupboard. Literally a good thing to just keep in the back of the cupboard as a backup. Are you going to struggle to hit your protein for the day? Use some protein powder. It's better to have the protein and use the powder than to not have the protein. So if that's our balance, and I find that with clients and with myself, that's a nice balance. That works pretty well. You can also use collagen peptides, which are pretty good. So I use Vital Proteins collagen peptides. I'm not on commission. And they can be added to anything. They could be added to your coffee, and they're flavourless. You can't taste them, and that's another nice wee way to just get some added protein in. So I think that wraps protein up fairly well. Don't overcomplicate things. Don't aim to overcomplicate things. Don't think by keeping things simpler that you're not being as optimal, that you're not being as good, that you could do better. Actually, honestly, I would say you're doing better if you can keep your diet super simple as much as possible for as long as possible. Because in the very long term, that is going to be much easier to sustain than overly complicating things. I can't see any way that somebody is going to record every single thing that they eat on MyFitnessPal for the rest of their lives. But if they start to get a visual understanding, a visual representation of what enough protein in a day looks like and what enough fruit and vegetables look like, you know what? You might find that you don't need to weigh and measure your food at all. So that's going to wrap us up for today. I will be back shortly with episode 5.